one thing that you say on there is that we have a very different cycle to a man's cycle. Could you just talk to me a little bit about what you mean by that?
Sure. Both men and women.
Hello and welcome back to the Mindspo Podcast. My name's Rochelle Fox and today's episode is one that I have been so excited to share with you because we're diving into something that affects almost every single woman out there. But although it affects so many of us, it rarely gets the attention that it really truly deserves. Today, we're going to be talking about your natural cyclical rhythm. Today, I am joined from Tio from the Sync-Way, who is a woman's health coach and a menstrual cycle expert. Now, Tio has actually dedicated her whole entire career to helping women understand their hormonal health and start to live in alignment with their natural cycles after her own journey with PCOS led her to discover the transformational power of cycle awareness. Now, in this conversation, we're going to unpack a lot. We're going to explore why so many women experience completely different energy levels every single day, the two distinct modes that every woman cycles through every single month. Tio's also going to uncover the real reason why your period might be late. And trust me, it's not what you think. And she's also going to share practical ways to sync with your natural cyclical rhythm instead of constantly fighting it. We're also going to talk about what partners need to know about women's cycles, because this conversation and this knowledge isn't just for women. It's for anyone who wants to better understand and support the women in their lives. So whether you're just beginning to explore your natural cyclical rhythm and nature, or you're looking to deepen your understanding, this conversation has something valuable for everyone. I truly can't wait for you to hear it. It's a really special one. So let's dive in.
Teo, welcome to the Mindspo Podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. I want to know, why did you start the work that you're currently doing and what's kind of brought you to this world?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation and to bring new perspectives to your audience, for you to understand really the reason why I do the work that I do today. You have first to understand the context of how I was raised and how I was brought up. So I would start there. I was born and raised in Romania in the early 90s, and that's, the first years post-communism. So there was always a lack in understanding women's health from the communism years, where everything was in lack and everything was restricted. And I was also born in a very religious family. Okay. All these topics about menstrual health, sexuality, periods, menstruation were taboo, were off the topic. Like, we never spoke about it. When I got my first period, I'll give you an example. So, among us classmates, the girls at school, it was something very cool. Everyone was so looking forward to get their periods. But the moment I really got my period, then I went home to tell my mom about it. I can only remember how much shame I felt and how embarrassed I was. I could not even pronounce the word menstruation. I was just crying and pointing down to my down parts to my mom. Also, the word menstruation was never pronounced in my household. Even my mom would refer to it as issues. So there was always that issues would be the translation from Romanian to English.
Oh, wow.
So there was always an association, a negative connotation that I would associate menstruation with, right? So there was this shame, being embarrassed, nobody talked about it. It was like a topic that I could not tap into. There was always a curiosity, but it's something like an unknown territory. So that was in the first years of my life. And then later on, I was diagnosed with PCOS. Back then, the only solution that I got from the doctors was to get on the pill, which I did for a couple of years. And I was hoping that that's going to solve all my issues, all the chaos in my life. And well, it did temporarily, because I was getting now regular periods again and no excruciating pain during my menstruation. But then everything started to come back to how it used to be before, the moment I came off the pill. In my early 20s, I started this self-discovery journey, like most of us do, and I started to understand everything about the negative thoughts and the power of the mind and the thought. And I was struggling a lot with brain fog, because that was one symptom that was always present in my life, and it was staying in between me and the work that I was doing. I was having my first 9-to-5 job. And I started slowly on this path of health. I wanted to get more healthy. And so I became in love with weightlifting. I was now working out, I was exercising. I was someone who was working out 6 times a week. Every day, 7 a.m. I was at the gym pushing through the workouts. And sort of that brain fog was lifted. But because I was pushing so hard and I sort of turned it into an obsession, it became very toxic. And I soon got to realize that although we promote the fitness industry as something that promotes health, it does on one hand, but it almost has nothing to do with health, at least for a woman. And I was so fixated on getting the right macros in to, build the muscle structure that I wanted for my body. I was not looking at the ingredients of the foods. I was not really paying attention to the quality of the foods. I was more interested in the quantity, right? And always pushing through. Those experiences made me realize that there's something wrong. I'm doing something wrong here. I was not sure what I was doing wrong, but I just knew there was something off. And it was only at the beginning of 2020 when I came across this book from Alisa Vitti, In the Flow. She's the author of it, actually the person who has coined the terminology cycle syncing. And it was only then when I realized that we have phases of the menstrual cycle. It's not just that we have a period every month, and there are phases. And as a woman, you go through all these fluctuations in a cycle, and it made me realize that we are indeed not the same every day. So from that moment, I really felt like I entered into a new pocket in the universe that I haven't tapped before. And so from that moment, I continued digging. So since that moment, it has become my passion, and it has become a topic that I know it has helped me a lot in my own self-discovery. And if it helped me so much, I thought there are for sure other women who will benefit from this. So I started talking about it in my office back then, 9 to 5. So if you would sit, for instance, next to me at lunch, like you would know already the conversation we are going to have. We're going to speak about menstrual health, about endometriosis and all the other possible conditions. And I was so passionate, and it was so surprising that nobody was talking about it and nobody knew about it. Women didn't know. So I thought, if it has helped me so much to overcome my own insecurities, and also it has enhanced my relationship with myself so much, I'm sure other women will benefit from it. And that's how I started my platform, The Sync Way, where I made it my mission to raise awareness and help other women, inspire them to live healthier lives, but healthy not as we define it for a man, healthy for a woman, and that means cyclical.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think what I resonate with so much about your story is the pain to purpose, because for me, I feel like my own story, the first ever episode of this podcast was called Pain to Purpose. Like, you found pain in your life, a point of contention, a challenge that you were going through, and then you've turned that into your purpose and into your mission. And I really relate to you talking about sitting down next to someone at lunch and then you talking about the menstrual cycle, because that used to be me with my old job. Someone would be standing next to me and I used to be DJing and I'd be talking about meditation. And it's just not what you would expect in that environment. But it's so funny how the things that change our lives really inspire us and then have this ripple effect on the world. You mentioned one thing that I would love just to understand a little bit more about. You said PCOS. I think that word's thrown around a lot. Could you just maybe tell a little bit about like what that specifically is?
Yeah, absolutely. So PCOS stands for polycystic ovarian syndrome, and it's a collection of symptoms that women experience, and some of the symptoms are irregular cycles, high levels of androgens. Some of them experience some cysts on the ovaries, excruciating pain during menstruation. So these are some of the symptoms that sort of build together the syndrome of polycystic ovaries.
Okay, wow. So I was looking at your Instagram, and I really recommend everyone go check out your Instagram because it's just a wealth of knowledge. And one thing that you say on there is that we have a very different cycle to a man's cycle. Could you just talk to me a little bit about what you mean by that?
Sure. Both men and women, we have this circadian rhythm, right? We work on a 24-hour clock. So all the different functions and the systems in our bodies, they are regulated to work on a 24-hour cycle. Take, for instance, sleep and wake, right? You feel energized in the morning, that's the cortisol rising, and then you become a lot sleepier towards the end of the day, right? It's your body, you're unconscious that all these systems are working in a 24-hour pattern, but it's happening in the background. And another system that is affected by this cycle is, for instance, digestion, not only sleep. And so men have only this cycle. I wouldn't say only, but it's the main cycle that dominates the male figure and the male body. Women, we have a 24-hour cycle as well as men. But on top of that, we have a 28-ish day cycle that influences all the other all the 12 systems in our bodies. So that's the main difference between a cycle of a man and a cycle of a woman. If we were to look at a graph and we would compare the different hormones in a male cycle and a women's cycle, you would see that let's take some random days, day 1, day 14, day 28. For a man, hormonally it would look the same, which means that a man is well equipped every single day of his cycle to perform the same, to be the same, to sort of have the same standards for himself, because hormonally, he is well equipped to perform all of these tasks.
Yeah.
And now when we have a look at the woman's cycle, when we take again random days, 1, 14, and 28, we see something entirely different from one day to the next, which means that a woman is hormonally different every single day. So her hormone profile is different every day. And we know about hormones that they impact all the 12 systems in our bodies, which means everything from cognition, metabolism, hunger levels, emotions, feelings, behaviors, everything that we are and we think and we feel as a woman will be experienced different on any random day in the cycle.
Yeah, wow, I feel that. I often feel like the world is built for men, and it's not really built for a woman's cycle, and we're working like men a lot of the time. And it was so funny because how I actually found your account originally was around the time that I was kind of going down the rabbit hole of this again, because I've gone into this world many, many times, but I had a month where I had worked myself to the bone and I had completely ignored my cycle. And when I tell you, I crashed. I had the worst period of my life, my worst pre-period, and I was angry, I was upset, I was moody, I was in pain, and I could just feel like my body was screaming at me. And it was this month that I had very much worked as a man. I'd completely just ignored my tracker. I hadn't looked at all of the different stages. I was like, I'm just gonna keep showing up and doing this thing. And I paid the price for it. It's interesting. Do you feel that a lot of women are completely oblivious to their cycle? Like, do you feel like this is something that is still really unknown knowledge these days?
Well, the reality is that we think of the menstrual cycle as an afterthought.
Yeah.
And what I mean with that is we only think of the cycle and we only think about our hormones the moment when we see the symptoms, when we see the signs, right? When we start to experience the pain during period, when we start to have joint pain, any cyclical symptoms that happen in a cyclical pattern, that's when we start to connect what we feel and what we experience on a daily basis. We start to connect it to our cycle. It's not something that we consciously think about every single day.
Yeah.
So, and that stems from the patriarchal way of living and the way that we have built our society, right? So if you look, for instance, back in not so long ago, 100 to 200 years ago, the women were dismissed for their pains, right? Everything that was womb related, any womb disease, any discomfort or so was associated with hysteria. So that silenced women, and women were suffering in silence, and they were not talking about what they were experiencing and the pains that they were going through.
Yeah.
Because there was a lack of conversation about the topic, then our generation and even our moms, maybe grandma generations, right? We still don't know what's normal and what not. We don't know exactly what's the level, what's the intensity of the discomfort that is normal and that every woman goes through. Because indeed all these fluctuations of hormones, they do impact, as I said, all the systems in the body. So it's normal not to feel the same, but to what extent? It's a mindset shift that needs to happen. First of all, we have to switch from looking at the menstrual cycle as an afterthought. We have to find a way to integrate it in what we do on a daily basis. And how we get there, we can talk about a practice that I love doing, and the only way to get there is to start to incorporate a thought, a deliberate thought on a daily basis about your menstrual cycle. Something that has worked for me and what has worked for the women that I work with is to implement in your morning routine. I'm sure everyone, and for sure your listeners, they do have a morning routine, or they are trying to implement and make some changes in their lives where they include maybe meditation, journaling, right? These are beautiful practices to have in the morning. So what if in those 10, 15 minutes that you spend for yourself every single morning, you would integrate a deliberate thought about your menstrual cycle. And that can look like many things. It can look like you just placing your arms on your belly, on your womb, and just consciously think about it. That is there, it has been with you since you were born, and it's going to stay with you till hopefully the day that you die, inactive or active. But it's part of who you are, and it's defining you as a woman. So integrate that into your conscious thoughts on a daily basis. And then you also have all the biological markers that you can follow to really understand all these fluctuations that you go through. So we are talking about cycle awareness practice. And here you can think of cycle tracking. Every day of your cycle you mark on your calendar, not only the days when you get a period, but also the days when you don't get a period. You really journal about your feelings, your emotions, how you feel energetically. And if you already have a journaling practice, you're already used to tuning into your body. But as women, we are missing a big insight that will help us connect with ourselves better, and it will help us connect ideas better, and it will help us make sense of why we behave differently, maybe.
Yeah.
Right? And that is including in your reflection exercise, in your journaling practice, including that awareness about the day of your cycle. So if you're cycling naturally, that means that you're not on any hormonal birth control. Let's say you have an argument with a partner.
Yep,
right?
been there.
Yeah.
We can go there.
So let's say you have an argument with a partner and you're journaling about it because it's something that you want to clarify for yourself, to create that space in your thoughts to really make sense of what's triggering you. So you find out that on day 5 of your cycle, you're journaling about that experience, about that argument. And you have, at a later point in time, you have a similar argument. Same situation, same topic, same partner. Everything is the same externally, but you are internalizing that experience a lot different. What was different from one moment to the next? So if you leave out and you are unconscious about that day of your cycle and the fluctuations that are going inside your body and how that impacts your mind, you're unaware of what's happening to you. You feel that maybe you're unstable. Like, why the same situation now is affecting me differently? What is going on with me? So the moment you are linking back to your journaling exercise, you're linking back the day of your cycle, you become aware of this cyclical nature of yours, and it unlocks a deeper level of connection with yourself.
Yeah, just like the awareness that you can get from just that observation is huge. I have a 10 days before my period is the drop off point. I feel this, and it was so interesting because it was the last year I have noticed it every single day, 10 days before the period comes. It's this moment where I just feel this, I don't even know how to describe it. It's kind of, it'll be I'm on Instagram or I'll be doing something in work and I'll just feel lower about everything, and it's kind of just like the happiness is like sucked out of me, and I'm finding it harder to be as optimistic, and it's often times where I'll have a little cry to myself. And it's so interesting that I've now, because of that awareness, like you said, of looking and noticing, I'm like, okay, this is a pattern, this is kind of happening around this time, and now I'm really usually very careful around that. I do on that time, and I definitely am someone that, with the practice that you're saying, I've implemented very similar things in my own life, and I've got to say it's amazing when you can not blame it on your period or blame it on your cycle, but instead just have the awareness of, okay, there is a pattern here. And if there's a pattern here, then it's not all just down to the moment, the situation. I also have to look at the things that are happening behind the scenes. Yeah. I think what's really powerful about what you're talking about is the ability to actually look at the cycle, not just when we get our period. And I think this is a practice that so many people, including myself, like for many years, and even our listeners now, might not be doing, because I think we think about our period the day before, the day of, the first 3 days, and then it just becomes, oh yeah, part of life. But actually thinking about it on a moment-to-moment basis. A lot of my friends only started thinking about ovulation when they wanted to get pregnant, right? And some of my friends, we never used to talk about ovulation, and then all of a sudden they want to get pregnant. And ovulation apparently now is this like big topic, like when am I ovulating? Like when are the eggs coming? But before then it was kind of all we would talk about is periods. But now we're looking to, have children, and all of a sudden this other part of the cycle is, yeah, really important. I'd love you to talk a little bit about the stages of the cycle. So what are the names of those stages?
I was just about to propose that because I think it would be so much valuable for your listeners, right? That we understand exactly what the cycle is. Because we often talk about our cycles and we refer to our periods as our cycles. So I'll give you some context. And it's quite common in English language and also in my mother tongue. I would say something similar. When we say, I just got my cycle, or I'm on my cycle, when we really mean that we are on our periods, we got our menstruation, right? The cycle in itself, it's not an event, because menstruation in itself is an event, something's happening in that moment. A cycle, by definition, is a series of events that happen in a particular order, and that it repeats in a similar fashion, in a similar pattern. So the menstrual cycle is the length of time from one period to the next period.
Okay.
Right? Yet the cycle has 2 events and 2 phases. And the day 1 of your cycle starts with day 1 of your period.
Okay,
period.
So that's day 1, like the first day of the bleed.
The first day of the bleed is day 1 of the cycle.
Okay.
And then you start counting forward from that moment. The second main event, and actually the star of your cycle, is ovulation. That's the main event.
Egg!
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Ovulation in itself is so important because that event divides the cycle into 2 parts, into 2 main phases. So we have the follicular phase, which is the phase from day 1 of your period till ovulation, including ovulation. And right after ovulation, we have the second phase, which is the luteal phase. Now, I say again that ovulation is the main event. Yes, because we want the egg to blossom and mature all this time. But without ovulation, you don't enter officially the luteal phase. What happens with ovulation, the egg is contained into a capsule. That capsule, after it bursts open, it erupts, then it turns into a temporary gland. And this temporary gland is called corpus luteum and the yellow gland. Some of the people call it like that. But this is the gland that produces progesterone, which is the dominant hormone in the luteal phase. So if we have no ovulation, it means no progesterone. And if we don't have the progesterone, it means no luteal phase. So this was a very big aha moment for me, and I loved the reactions that women get when they hear this for the first time. But I'm sure you must have had a late period, at least once in your life, right?
Yeah.
So we often say, oh, my period is late. But what really happens, it's something really interesting. As I said, the follicular phase, the very first part of your cycle, that's a phase that is fixed in length because ovulation doesn't happen always at the same time. More or less, it happens around day 14, but it can shift. Not everyone ovulates on day 14, and even if you would ovulate on day 14, if that's the pattern of your cycle, it's not guaranteed that you always ovulate on that same day because of different factors. It can be a lot of stress that maybe you have in your life. It can be physical, mental stress, an illness, injury, some other reasons. So when that happens, when ovulation is being delayed, the first phase of your cycle gets stretched, right? We have a long follicular phase.
Okay.
The luteal is always fixed in length, which means that from one cycle to the next, if your luteal is, let's say, 10 to 12 days, it will always be that length. So the moment ovulation gets pushed back, the luteal phase only starts after ovulation.
Right.
So if you ovulate late, then it means your luteal gets pushed back, which makes it look like your period is late. But in reality, it was your ovulation that was delayed.
Period is right on time. We've been blaming the period the whole entire time.
So
how interesting.
There's another shift that should happen is not to focus so much on our periods, but really focus on supporting ovulation. Right? What are the ways in which we can support ovulation to get that regular cycle? Because I often hear also from the women in my community, it's always the question, how can I get my period back or make my period regular again? It's more about, the question should be about ovulation. How can we regulate your ovulation? And how can we get your ovulation back? Because that's the reason you're not getting a period, because you most certainly haven't ovulated.
Wow, that's so fascinating. And that makes so much sense because the ovulation is really like the egg. That is the body saying, I'm ready to reproduce. I'm ready to let this go. And then it's withholding that because it doesn't feel safe or there's something going on or extra stresses. And that's like the body's wisdom doing its thing. I've definitely noticed a late period before when I've been traveling a lot, going through different time zones and putting like stress on my body. So yeah, wow, that's so fascinating. When you talk about these two cycles, you said something online that I absolutely love, where you say that we have a social engagement cycle, or part of our cycle is social engagement, and the other part is self-preservation. The word self-preservation for me is, I love that, because I definitely feel I have these two cycles, and I love the way that you worded that. I'd love you to just talk a little bit about those two cycles. Where do they lie? And yeah.
The idea of why I'm using these main two, I call it the female modes. So the woman has two modes every single cycle. And as you said, we have the social engagement and the self-preservation mode. Now, I'll give you some context of why I came with this framework and why I find it so much easier for women to understand themselves. Because we often see in the space of menstrual cycle health and cycle syncing, we hear everyone referring to the cycle as being divided into 4 phases.
Yes.
Right? Menstrual, follicular, ovulatory, and luteal.
Yeah, it's like a pie. That's how I always imagine it.
It's like very contained, very well defined.
Yeah.
Right? And for someone who's very new in the space, and for someone who's just now starting to understand that there's more to the cycle than the period, that can be very confusing because we don't understand any of it. Where is one phase starting and where is the other one ending? And the first step to understanding their cycle is to understand and notice in themselves that very clear differentiation between what I just said, the two modes. So basically the follicular phase, which is a phase where the body is gearing up for fertility, right? The follicular phase ends with ovulation. So the goal of the mind and the body of a woman who's going through that phase is to focus on conception.
Let's make a baby.
It's all about fertility. It's all about high energy, being outgoing. You feel inherently more outgoing and social and just ready to meet the person. You're glazing over people's flaws because you flow with much more ease because you don't want to be picky during those days, right? The body knows that there is only a certain amount of days every cycle that you can get pregnant, right? The fertile window. So we want to ensure that we do all the right work for when that fertile window opens, that we have a mate and we are ready to get pregnant.
Whether
we want it or not. That's what the body wants. So that's why it's the social engagement phase.
Okay.
Everything is turned towards engagement, meeting people and being out there. And then during the luteal phase, so after ovulation, the fertility window closed, right? We are no longer interested in meeting the right person, having the best sex and really getting pregnant.
Yep.
Now the body is in doubt. It doesn't know if you get pregnant or not. That cycle is too early to tell. So just in case you got pregnant, it wants to make sure that you're safe. So it doesn't want to put you at risk. It doesn't want you to engage in new conversations with new people and meet new people. It wants you to slow down, stay with the people that you feel safe with, right? That's why we feel that energy going more downwards and inwards. We want to be more with ourselves, maybe with just our close partner, close friend. We don't feel that risk-taking energy anymore.
It's the anti-fuckboy zone.
You said it right.
I don't know about him. I've been in a partner for 14 years, but even with you talking right now, that is the zone in my cycle where I'm taking less bullshit from everyone. I'm just a little bit more on the edge.
Your body is more sensitive to stressors.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever feels unsafe, your body is very alert during this time because, again, it wants to keep you and the possible embryo safe. That's why the self-preservation mode. So for a woman who just starts understanding her menstrual cycle, it's a really interesting and easy practice to only notice, so she doesn't have to focus on pinpointing on that chart pie, where is one phase starting and where the other one ends. It's really more tuning into these two very distinct modes and feel for herself how different they feel from each other.
Yeah, wow. And so if you wanted to go on a date with someone new, what stage of the cycle would you recommend?
Well, I would say it really depends on the intention you have.
Okay.
Right? So let's say that you're willing to go now on, you want to go on a date, be it an intimate date or a business date can also be the case. If you're looking to entertain yourself and the partner you're with, or maybe your business partner, right? You want to have an easygoing conversation. Let's have some fun. Maybe it's gonna end up with some sex. I'm not sure how you want that evening to, or like day to turn out. But if that's your intention, then I would suggest to do it during your self-engagement phase, right? And that is the first phase of the cycle. Now, if your intentions are different and if you really want to test out where your partnership is going, or if you really want to understand if the person you're meeting is the right fit to become your business partner, let's say, or if it's someone that you want to collaborate with, if you really want that filter, like the bullshit filter that you were talking about, if you want that to be switched on, then I would recommend to set this date during the self-preservation mode.
I love this. It's like a wisdom stick that we have.
Yeah, it's such a powerful awareness.
Yeah.
And I just wish every woman knew about it.
100%. I definitely feel this. Around the time that I found your account, I was in self-preservation mode. And I was just online looking for answers again, just to really deeply understand this stuff again, because I felt like I'd kind of done a number on myself and completely ignored my cycle, and then I was paying for it. And I had a really big social event on that I couldn't get out of. That was in another country and I wanted to go. It was a beautiful thing. But when I say I was in absolute self-preservation shutdown mode, I really relate to that. I feel that these sort of modes are so interesting for people to look at, especially when setting dates for things. One thing I'll share with you as a content creator, I always try and bulk film, record, do things in that first phase when I'm in that really open, bubbly phase. Now, I do a lot of my writing in the self-preservation phase. That's for me when I go inwards, and then I'll go over scripts or I'll go over copy, but I try not to film or record in that self-preservation phase. I've even found if I try recording, not podcasts, like conversations, I'm fine usually, but if I'm doing to camera videos, just talking, I can just jumble my words and get super frustrated with myself. If it's just me with a camera, the level of inner frustration goes up on that second phase. Is that like a hormone thing that's happening there?
Yeah. I'm just gonna go back to one word that you said, which is frustration, right? So that's exactly what this cycle awareness can help you more with, right? To unlock and unpack that frustration, because it's, all this cycle syncing philosophy and methodology, it's suggesting to align your life based on where you are in the cycle. But let's be real, it's lovely as it sounds in the books, and I've been trying to do it for years. It doesn't really work. Like, if you're someone like you and I, where we are in charge of our own schedules, right? It can be something manageable, doable, as you said, like creating all that content in a bulk, and really scheduling certain meetings or certain activities during that social engagement phase. But it's not really a reality for everyone. It's not that easy because of how our society is being built. So it's not so much about trying to create a perfect schedule for yourself that is perfectly aligned with your cycle. It's more about adjusting the standards you have for yourself.
Oof, that's so good. I love that.
It's the benchmarks that we have been using all this time for ourselves, where we expect ourselves to be the same every single day, think the same at the same speed, same creativity, and be expressive, and communication flows at the same level and with the same ease every day. That's the expectation we have from ourselves.
That's like me literally having the expectation that I'm going to be the same every single day and that I'm always going to show up the same. But like you said, it's having that awareness that I'm not a man. Amazing. I'm quite happy being a woman. But as a woman, we have this cycle that we have to listen to. Oh, that's so powerful.
That's exactly it. And well, it's easier said than done.
Yes.
Right? It takes practice, and it's a skill, I would say, to create that space in your thoughts and the self-compassion towards yourself, that it is okay not to feel the same and not to be the same and not to perform exactly the same every single day. I myself, I'm on day 3 of my period right now.
Oh my gosh, I've got you.
Yeah.
Wow, you're a trooper for coming and doing a podcast.
Right,
Thank
so
you.
it's something that,
Yeah.
I don't have full control over how I'm scheduling my days. Yes, I would have loved to, just be at home, cozy in my space and, warming myself up with a hot beverage or something. And at the same time, I'm enjoying very much this conversation, but I have set up a standard for myself, an expectation from myself. I know that probably my words are not going to flow as easier as they flow during my high peak estrogen days. That's when we are more fluent. It just feels like everything flows with more ease during the social engagement period, especially. So it's more about the expectations you have from yourself, and showing compassion and understanding and accepting. It's accepting that you are cyclical. You are not linear like a man.
You said one of my favorite words there, which is compassion. I talk a lot about that in my book and in my work. And I feel that for me, compassion has been so huge. And even though I have so much compassion for myself, I think that you're a beautiful reflection of bringing compassion into our menstrual cycle. And I think that that's a practice that I could definitely apply to my life. And I know so many people listening, just having that compassion for being a woman, for being in this cyclical nature is such an important thing. I want to talk a little bit about PMS. Now you have a whole entire program on PMS that people can go and check out, and you're like a PMS, I'm going to call you like a PMS wizard, which like you're a bit of a master at it. Is PMS something that you've suffered with in your own life? Because I definitely have. Let's talk about it. What is PMS? What does that actually even mean?
We are doing a full circle, right? Like you find strength from pain and you find passion and purpose from pain.
Yeah.
Right? Like it has been something that I have been dealing with like for many, many years, and I have had no idea that it was connected to my menstrual cycle. All these symptoms of intense mood swings to the point where I felt like a completely different person at random days in my month, because again, I was not aware that it was connected to the cycle. And all of these physical symptoms as well, the joint pain, the swollen legs and acne, and all these symptoms that I was, again, not even aware that they were connected to the cycle, that they would show up in a cyclical fashion every month. And that led to arguments, of course, with my partner, with people around me, people that I loved. But I got to understand that it was not an argument, or like the friction was not between me and them, it was between me and myself, right? Because I didn't understand what was going on inside of me and why I was feeling so different at random moments. Again, because I was having PCOS, I had irregular periods, which meant that all these symptoms would show up very random, and I was always unprepared. PMS, let's start with that, right? Like, what is PMS? PMS stands for premenstrual syndrome. So it's a collection of symptoms that show up during that week just before your period. So the 5 to 7 days before you get your period, before you get your bleed. So these symptoms can be both physical, anything from cramps, joint pain, back pain, swollen legs, swollen fingers, swollen feeling in your face, extremities, to cyclical acne, to then everything emotional and psychological. So think about all these mood swings, intense anxiety, depression, that feeling that you're not yourself, or where you feel off. When you have, for instance, when you have a flu, right? Your cognition doesn't work well. You cannot focus on the task at hand because there's brain fog, right? There's inflammation in your body. So that feeling that you have when you have a cold or a flu, that feeling could be something described as PMS if it shows up in a cyclical pattern just before you get your period. So that's PMS in a nutshell. Now, there are ways in which you can support your body to heal from PMS. But before that, it is important for you to understand where in the body these symptoms show up. So I think for everyone who suspects they might be experiencing PMS, it's important to do like a body scan first. When you're in that premenstrual week, where these symptoms show up and how intense are they? Because it's also important to understand the intensity. So if we talked a little bit about hormones and how they fluctuate and the fact that they impact all the 12 systems in the body. So that means, again, that week is going to feel different from everything else. So that's normal, but it shouldn't interrupt your daily life. It shouldn't interrupt what you were planning to do that day. So if it disrupts your daily routine, and if it's creating so much discomfort to the point that you are not yourself, that you have to stay in bed all day, you cannot fulfill your duties at work or at home with your family and kids, then there's something that has to be investigated. You have to look into it, because that's not normal.
Yeah, is it that the things that we do before that PMS window, is it that time that actually affects how intensely we feel the PMS?
That's a really good question. If we take science, for instance, there's no clear evidence what is really affecting it, but I have a few theories, because I've done a lot of research on myself, and also, having talked to so many women. So the eggs in the ovaries, they take 90 days to mature, right? So that means that
like
every 3 cycles.
Like a fine wine.
It's exactly like that. So for three cycles, you're going to mature the eggs that you're going to from which that one egg is going to be released in the last cycle of the 3. Which means that everything that you do during those 3 cycles is going to affect your ovulation, which is going to affect how you are experiencing that particular cycle, the last one in row.
Fascinating.
It's not only what you do in that cycle where you're experiencing the PMS, it's everything that you do in the previous 2 cycles. So like for a total length of, let's say, more or less 80, 90 days. So it's accumulation of everything that's happening to you, what you go through, if it's traveling, if it's poor nutrition, if it's a lot of stress accumulated on the body. All of that can impact ovulation, which in turn impacts how you experience PMS.
What are some of your top tips to reduce like PMS symptoms and just feel better during that time of our cycle? What are some of the things that you like to do for yourself?
Well, first of all, I would start with cycle tracking. Cycle tracking has to be at the core of it. Without tracking every single day how you feel emotionally, physically, energetically, and then really be able to see a pattern for yourself, where in the cycles these symptoms show up, because that's going to be the first indicator that you might experience intense PMS, right? If you start noticing that, hey, these symptoms, I have them starting day 26 every single cycle, or I'm having this argument, or like I feel more on the edge on day 25 of every cycle. So that already tells you where these patterns show up. If we then take the protocols to sort of support your body in healing from PMS, I would take nutrition as one very big one. A big category where you should pay attention to. So if we take nutrition, we know that hormones are being made from everything that we consume, all the foods that we consume. We have the main macros. If we take carbs, protein, and fats, carbs are giving your body the energy to produce all the hormones, and then the building blocks for hormones are protein and fats. So it's about the quality of your foods that matters here. It's not a quantity. So quality first, because we are being surrounded by all these super highly processed foods, right? All the packaged foods and all the deep fried foods. We tend to be a generation that is overfed but undernourished.
Yeah, I really feel that. I think that we're kind of look for convenience rather than for quality. And I think that we've prioritized convenience over everything. And I think that's just like such a hallmark of our generation. We want everything now. We want Uber Eats. We want something quick. We want to put something in the microwave. Yeah.
Yeah, it's ease and convenience indeed, but the body will feel it eventually. And one way that your body is showing you that it is missing something is through PMS.
Yep.
Because the symptoms are really the messengers, right? The symptoms that you experience during PMS or during any disorder condition that you are suffering from, the symptoms are not a problem. The symptoms are really the key messages that your body is sending you to tell you that something that you're doing on a daily basis, something in your lifestyle, maybe your nutrition, the way you work, your stress level, your relationships, something is off. Something is misaligned with what your body truly needs. And the only way for your body to tell you that is through symptoms, through physical symptoms. Because if there was another language your body would use it. But there's no language other than the physical symptom. So
that's such a, can I just say, you've the way that you've just said that, it's literally our body speaking to us. It's the communication that our body is using. It's so important for people to think about it like that. That's just, I think, such a penny drop moment for so many people. If it had words, it would speak to you in words, but it hasn't got words. So here it is giving you all of these signs in the only way it knows how. Yeah, wow.
And unfortunately, we medicate, right? Like whenever we have these symptoms, what do? We silence the messenger. We take an ibuprofen, a paracetamol, a pill, to numb the pain. And we basically numb and silence the message. We don't listen to what's going on. And the body has a wonderful way of showing us very whispered messages in the beginning, like very mild symptoms. We don't listen, we kept on not listening, we ignore it. But then the body becomes louder, right? The symptoms get more intensified, more painful, there's more discomfort. And if you numb the pain in one area, let's say now you experience painful periods and you numb it with what's like the over-the-counter medication.
Naproxen.
Right, like what you numb the messenger, and then the body will find a way to show you and tell you that you need to pay attention to all these areas in your life, and it's going to turn to other systems in your body, and it's going to create disease and illnesses in other parts. That's why the menstrual cycle is really the fifth vital sign. It tells so much about your overall health. Now, we deviated a little bit from PMS, right? We were talking about the main categories where I would encourage women to make a few steps to heal their PMS. So first would be nutrition, right? Like we focus a lot on quality. Quality matters. Then quantity also matters, because it's not enough to just eat bits and pieces of your meals. We really need to nourish ourselves. And I know this is a controversial topic when it comes to breakfast. Like, should we fast? Should we not fast? Should we have breakfast? Intermittent fasting is like a lot of these buzzwords. Everyone's talking about it and everyone has an opinion about it. Now, for a woman, it's really, really important, and I cannot emphasize this enough. If you're following what I post every single day, I'm showing everyone what I have for breakfast, because breakfast is so important for a woman's health. So start with breakfast. Have a savory breakfast built around protein. And when I say savory, I do not necessarily mean that it cannot be slightly sweet in flavor. If you're, for instance, eggs, avocados, and bacon is not your thing, you can go for yogurt, like full-fat Greek yogurt with some chia seeds or cottage cheese, right? There's a slight sweet flavor, but the core macronutrient is protein. So your breakfast is built around protein, right? Carbs are just adding some flavor, like a nuance to your breakfast. It's not the centerpiece of it. And the main reason for this is that cortisol levels peak in the first 30 minutes after you wake up. So it is advised to have this breakfast in the first 90 minutes or so after you wake up. That's why intermittent fasting for a woman is not supporting hormone health. So nutrition is one component. And then if I were to simplify now, there are so many tactics and so many protocols. Another big one would be to pay extra attention to that last week in the luteal phase.
Okay.
So that's the last week just before you get your period, because that's when our bodies are showing all these symptoms, the PMS. So every cycle during that week, try to intentionally slow down. Slow down how you conduct your work, slow down in your workout, slow down in literally everything that you do, in the way that you eat. It can be as simple as be more mindful about the speed that you eat with. When you're enjoying your meal, slow it down, be more present in the flavors, in the taste, in the structure of the food. And the one reason for doing this is also because as women, we have a harder time to go into the parasympathetic nervous system during that time. So during the luteal phase, so we have to be intentional, even more intentional about slowing down and supporting our bodies to calm down and relax. Although everyone says, oh, you have to slow down during luteal, or you have to do less during luteal, it's again easier said than done, because our bodies have literally a harder time slowing down when we should actually slow down. So that's why the conscious effort. We tend to have disturbed sleep during luteal because our core body temperature goes up. So after ovulation...
Can I just say, during this phase, sometimes I'm like, I want this man out of my bed with his hot body next to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes me and my partner sleep as separate doonas. We sleep in the same bed, but we have these bamboo separate doonas when we're in Bali, or when we're in Australia, we bring them with us. I travel with my bamboo bedding because there is just this time in my cycle where I'm so fussy about like one leg in, one leg out, and I get like all different body temperatures, and I just can't stand sleeping next to him during my luteal phase. It's something I've always noticed, and ever since we got 2 doonas, it solved all of the problems.
That's amazing, great that you found a solution for it.
Yeah.
But like so many other women are unaware that, or why they might find it more difficult to fall asleep, or like they have these. And then also in your case, maybe that in itself could just start an argument, right? We are already on the edge, we feel more sensitive, and we have the bullshit filter on, right? Like we see all these imperfections and we are hot inside. We don't know what's happening to us. So this awareness can solve so many arguments and so many mysteries in your relationship, right? So right after ovulation, the core body temperature goes up, and it's going to stay up until the next period starts. So for about 2 weeks or so, you have probably trouble sleeping. A lot of women also report nightmares during this time. And so your body is going through so many changes. That's why the last week of luteal, take self-care even more serious than you do in the rest of the cycle.
I think what I really love about this conversation is how you're really bringing the intention to the forefront of how women look at their cycle. It's really about having that attention and awareness, which is something that I feel so many of us have just forgotten about. Like we said at the beginning of this podcast, we just focus on my period, I just have a period, and the rest of the cycle is just like, oh, it's just life. But it's not. We are kind of working through all of these different stages. There was something I saw on your Instagram that I have to ask about. You talk about cold feet and period cramps. I really want to understand that, because I am someone that gets really cold hands and cold feet, and we're in Amsterdam right now recording this. I'm currently wearing my Amsterdam fluffy socks with some marijuana leaves on them, just because they were the ones, they seemed very touristy. But I was like, wow, what has that got to do with cramps? Can you elaborate a little bit about that?
Sure. That's something that, you know, I wished I listened to my mom whenever she was telling me back in the days when I was a kid, always put on your socks, because I was always wearing, like, I was barefoot all the time. I don't know, probably also you in Australia, I heard everyone say barefoot.
Aussies are always barefoot. Yeah. We are barefoot all the time. And I think in winter we're barefoot as well. And then we wonder why we're so cold, because our houses aren't insulated properly. We're not really built for winter. Yeah.
So I wish I listened to the advice, because there's wisdom in it. And I recently also got interested in researching more about TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, right? So that's where this approach is coming from, to keep your feet warm, because this way you also keep your womb warm. Because what you want to do during menstruation is to keep a healthy flow in your body, right? For the bleed to flow. And there is a beautiful analogy that, well, I learned it from my coach, who has she's taught me almost everything about the menstrual cycle, and she's always using this analogy of a coconut oil, right? So we have to think of our periods as coconut oil. When you put coconut oil in a cold environment, what happens to it? It solidifies, right? When we keep it warm, when we warm it up, it starts to melt again. It becomes liquid. And it's the same what's happening with our periods. If we want to ensure that our bodies are the right environment for the period to flow, we have to keep our bodies warm. So it starts with the feet. Then also, when you think about the nutrition, what do you feed your body? Like, think about the warm soups, the warm meals, hot beverage, everything. It all creates a more comfortable environment, right? It gives you that sense of comfort. If you prefer to go barefoot, that's fine. But also just placing a hot beverage on your belly, it just feels comfort, instant comfort, right? Yeah. And the same is like the hot water bottle.
Oh, I'm a massive like the minute I get my period, Chris will make me a hot water bottle. Like, he's very well I'm not going to use the word trained because I don't think he would like me to say he's very well trained, but he is. He is like an absolute gem with me when I get my period. He knows exactly what to do. And he just kind of snuggles me up, puts a weighted blanket on me, gives me a hot water bottle, usually makes me a tea. He's like, what do you want to watch? Just lets me go. We don't work on the first day of my bleed. That's like kind of, we always have the day off. And if I try and have a meeting about anything or do anything, he's like, what are you doing? We're not doing this today. This is not the day that I'm going to have a discussion with you about this. So yeah. Speaking of men, I have some final questions for you. So I've been in a 14-year relationship, and TMI, I'm not on any contraception. I haven't been for, I think it's like 12 years now, completely free. I've got a really healthy relationship with my cycle. And through being in this relationship with my partner, I really started to get him on board with understanding the woman's cycle. I sent him the same books that I was reading, and I was like, you need to understand this. I feel like this is not just for me, but it's also for you. And I would love to encourage any women listening to this podcast to give this last little snippet to their partners, their husbands, their brothers, any of the men in their life, just to better understand what it is that we go through, and also why it's important for men to understand this information. And while we were off air, you said something really beautiful, which was that we have to, as women, understand it first, and that it's so important for women to understand our cycle. And once we understand our cycle, men are going to understand our cycle as well. But I'd love just to ask you a few questions from a man's perspective. So from a man's perspective, why should men care about learning about the ins and outs of a menstrual cycle? Why do you feel it's important for men to understand this information?
The moment a man starts to understand that the woman is not going through the same ups and downs as he's going through on a daily basis, he could start to create more space for her to just be who she is. It's about accepting, showing her that he is accepting and he is creating the space that she needs to just be herself. And again, I'm going back to the point that you just made before. It starts with the woman, first of all, accepting that for yourself. She needs to create that space for herself to just be who she is, a cyclical being, not the same every day and almost different every single day. And the mismatch in desires, everything, a lot of it could be solved just by having the awareness that the woman is not the same as a man. Because I think for a man, I'm not saying that there are no external factors. If we remove all the external factors, right? Maybe it's a stressful day, particularly stressful day, or something has happened, a loss or some traumatic event. But if we remove all the external factors, the man, physiologically and biologically speaking, he is the same every single day. So his vehicle that he is going with in this life, his body, is getting him equipped to be the same every single day. So he sort of has a chance every single day to be and do what he wants. Whereas for a woman, that looks very different, right, from a man.
My visual of this is that I'm imagining we're on a race course. Not that life is a race, but we're on a race course, and it's like we're getting, every single day a woman gets into a different car, a different looking car with different power, with a different exterior, with different abilities. Whereas a man, he's just getting into the same car, it can drive at the same pace, it can just do its consistent thing. Whereas women, we're just kind of always stepping into a different environment to operate from.
Oh, that's beautiful what you said right there.
Yeah, my brain is so visual. I'm full of metaphors after writing a book for the last year. All my brain does. You say car and I'm all of a sudden on a racetrack.
I can clearly see it. It's exactly it.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it's beautiful because then when you understand what car you get in at every phase in the cycle, then you know what car you're driving. You don't have to figure it out every single day. You are so predictable because you're going to drive on the same car on that around the same time of the cycle, every single cycle.
Yeah, so sometimes you'll get in, you'll be like, okay, I know it's a stick today. I know that I'm just going to have to do a little bit more. And other times it's cruise control. It's going really fast. It's a Tesla. It feels like my hands are off the wheel and I can just let things flow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And when you're unaware of your cycle, like you feel like you get into random cars every single time and you have to figure out the manual every single time you get into the car. But it's actually the same car that you were in a previous cycle, but you haven't developed that awareness that is the same car. Oh, I love this analogy.
Yes.
I absolutely love it.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, really good.
My next question I have from a man's perspective is, if you could create a simple cheat sheet for men, do this or don't do this, what would you do for the phases, or even just those two cycles, that outgoing cycle and that more introverted kind of reclusive cycle? What would be your top tips?
Oh, I love that. Let's take, for instance, a full cycle, and then we choose some random but not so random days. So if we start with, let's say, during her period, like day 1 to 7 of her cycle, you want to create comfort for her. If there are any extra chores that you can take off her plate, do that, because probably she's not willing, or like she find it difficult to ask for that help, but she needs it. So be there for her, create more comfort, because she is going through a pro-inflammatory response, which is her bleed. So there's inflammation happening in her body, and the bleeding in itself is a process that needs nurturing, needs care. So she's going to appreciate you if you do that for her during her bleed. Then if we move a little bit further in the cycle, if there are any arguments, or if there are any discussions, anything that needs a resolution and you haven't yet figured it out, you can create a safer space to have that argument and reach a more positive resolution of that argument if you do that right after her period, I would say. So day 8, 9 to right after ovulation. So that's possibly somewhere mid-cycle. So during that phase is a really good phase to solve anything that is probably has piled up in your relationship, because she's going to feel more open for it. She's not going to shut you up. She's going to be more cooperative, and she's willing to look for a resolution together, right? You're going to be able to have arguments and probably end your argument with some lovely sex, because she's also in her fertile window.
Yeah.
So
I can agree with that. I definitely feel set and setting for these sorts of conversation as a woman is so important. And when you can educate a man of like, if we just bring this up a week from now, you're going to get a whole nother side of me. And I think that, yeah, that's so powerful.
Right, so that's a beautiful time for solving anything that has been bubbling up in the relationship. Then I would say again, we go into the luteal phase right after ovulation. So now the fertile window has closed, which means that also if you want to have sex or intimacy, she might not really feel that hot and sassy and spicy as she used to feel a few days before. So also when it comes to intimacy, be aware that her hormones, which are driving her libido, are going through changes. It's not like the testosterone that gets in the male body in these pulses at a recurring time. So her libido is also going to be different. So be gentle to her, and also understand that if she's not in the mood all the time, it doesn't mean that she doesn't love you or she doesn't want the affection and attention and the closeness. It's her body's response to that self-preservation mode that she just entered right after ovulation. And then during the luteal phase, it's again the care, right? She needs to slow down. She has to support her body to get into that parasympathetic drive, slowing down and resting more self-care. Yeah. She might find it difficult herself to do that, so nudge her. Give her a nudge, maybe book a massage for her. Give her a foot rub. Or
foot rub sounds great. I'm ready for a foot rub.
Oh, I love that. We do that actually, me and my husband. I always ask him for the foot rubs, especially during luteal. Yeah. And those feel the best.
I think also my big tip for luteal is for men, this is not the time to go and book dinner with all of the couples and have everyone over and invite everyone over to the house and have lots of guests. That's one thing I've had in my relationship. Just that's my time generally where it's like I'm not going to have lots of social engagements. I'm not ready to have a couples dinner with everyone. I just want to do my own thing on my own schedule in my own time.
Yeah, that's a big one. It's again creating those pockets in your cycle where you just need your me time or your alone time. And one way to make your partner aware of this as a woman, what I like to do at the beginning of each new cycle, because I set up in my calendar, in Google Calendar, that's what I use on a daily basis, I put inside the phases that I'm going through. So I started a new cycle, like in my period, and I just mark on my calendars when are approximately going to be the phases. So, and I share that with my husband, and he knows. And it's one, self-discovery that you discover for yourself, these phases, but you also, when you involve your partner, he's discovering that with you together. And it's almost like a couple's activity when you do that together.
I love it because it becomes part of the conversation. And at the end of the day, it is a huge part of the conversation. And I think that's whether you're having the conversation about your cycle or you're not having the conversation, it's already part of the conversation. Yeah. It's like the elephant in the room that's there. I got one last question for you from a man's perspective. If there was one crucial piece of advice that you want men to take away about supporting a partner during their cycle, what would it be? Is there anything your partner's known about a cycle that was like life-changing for both of you guys?
It has to go back to those standards that you set for yourself as a woman, because we are so self-critical of ourselves, right? And because we expect from ourselves to be the same, to perform the same, and feel and live life and internalize everything in the same way every single day. And we sometimes need some extra support from our close one, and often that person is our partner in life. And we need sometimes that person to remind us that it's okay. It's okay to not feel the same. It's okay to feel that you want to be by yourself today, or it's okay to feel less outgoing and social some days in your cycle. I think that should be the one thing that men should be more aware of, to help her create that space that she needs to just be herself and not expect from herself to be the same every single day.
Yeah, I love that.
Because it all goes down to self-love. I feel as women, we have a harder time to fully understand what self-love is. Because we feel about ourselves that we are unpredictable, that we are all over the place. And many times it goes down to these fluctuations that we don't understand. We feel ecstatic and magnetic and outgoing one day, and then the next day nothing changes in our environment, but then we are completely off.
Yeah, we're in a different car.
You're in a different car. So that's having that support to remind you that it's okay, and that to have that reassurance that that partner is always going to be there for you. I think that's what a woman needs the most.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's just that acceptance of loving you in all cycles, like loving all parts of you. And I think that's just such a practice for a relationship, realizing that a woman is so many things. We are multitudes, and there are so many different sides of us, and it's about loving every single side of us, and us learning to love every single side of ourselves, every single stage, every single cycle. You are a wealth of knowledge on this topic, and I know there's so much more that you could talk about, but where can people find more about you, your programs, your Instagram? How can people dive in to your world if they're wanting extra support with their own cycle, understanding themselves? Please tell the audience.
Yeah, so I share lots of educational content mainly on Instagram. That's the main channel.
Yeah, your Instagram is amazing. Like when I first found it, I was just like, oh yeah, gosh, I forgot about this. Oh wow, it's really the way that you describe this topic is, yeah, I just want to say to you, it's very easy, digestible, relatable, also funny. Sometimes I'll just be giggling at the little things that you say. So yeah, your Instagram. So what's your Instagram tag?
The Sync Way.
Yep, Sync Way.
The Sync Way. And I also have a podcast where I go a little bit more in depth on certain topics. It's just me speaking in front of a camera, where I have more space to dig a little bit deeper than Instagram allows.
Yeah.
But everything can be found on Instagram, all the links, and also the links to my programs. As you said, PMS is in the spotlight at this stage in my life. So I've done a lot of research, and I've put everything together in a program for women.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Mindspo podcast. I really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like I'm just taking away a whole entire just new perspective, and especially the compassion, the having compassion for myself and having compassion for my cycle. That's been really huge for me, because I have a lot of compassion for myself, but bringing that into the cycle. So many beautiful takeaways, and I just really appreciate it. So anyway, we will see you on the next one. All the links will be down below in the description box.
Thank you for joining me for this episode. You can discover more from Mindspo on Instagram and TikTok by following @Mindspo and myself @Rochelle_Fox. If this episode inspired you, then please pass it on and share the love. And lastly, always remember, you create your own reality. So go and make some magic.